Hello, foster care advocates. My name is John Adams, and I am the host of the Foster Care Remix. Well, welcome, foster care advocates. Thanks for joining the show. I am John Adams, and the host of the Foster Care Remix. And I have a special guest with us today, Andrea Huerta. She is a foster parent here at Southeastern Children's Home. And how long have you been fostering here at Southeastern now?
We've been on campus we just hit a year mark.
1 year.
And then we've been fostering in general, just a standard traditional foster home prior to that for total, I think, almost 9 years.
Oh, wow. So I thought you might have been here a little over a year.
We just hit over a year.
Just hit over a year. So just a little bit about Andrea. She and her husband Andrew have been fostering, like she just said, for almost 9 years, and they now have 4 biological kids, age 1 to 10, and have fostered up to 5 kids at one time, and including Spanish-speaking children, teen moms, and in the last year they've experienced living on our campus. And being a part of like a foster community or village here at Southeastern. So just Andrea, how did you and Andrew get into fostering? Is it something that you have always wanted to do and just knew that this was kind of led, or was there just like this moment where you were like, we just need to step in and help?
Yeah, I didn't grow up with it at all. And so it was actually something where I didn't see it in the church or neighborhood. Maybe I was oblivious to it, but I didn't grow up with it at all. And I never had that like on my mind or heart because I didn't experience it or see it. So I was actually at a coffee shop in downtown Simpsonville. And the owner, later I learned, is a foster parent who's adopted at foster care. And he had placed on his little coffee tables there a brochure about statistics about what kids in foster care face. And specifically the, different education rates. And I remember reading those statistics and thinking, well, that is just wrong and someone should step in and help. And this was over, 10 years ago now. And so there were not as many nonprofits available to help those issues. And seeing that, I remember calling the number on there. I don't remember exactly where it led me, but at the time I didn't feel like we could foster, which is kind of funny now, but he was like, we can't do that, but surely we could do something. And there weren't really volunteer options at that point. There wasn't much to do. It was foster or you really can't do much. And so, but that was on my mind. And they say, I think it takes about 2 years from the time you become like really aware that you want to do something with it before you actually do something.
Yeah.
And so it probably was a good year or two before we decided to go ahead and get caught at one of those booths and fill out some papers. And then we're like, I don't know what we just signed up for exactly, but we signed up to be a respite family and felt like, well, we've got extra plates. How hard can it be? Extra rooms, extra plates. That's all you need, right?
Yeah, that's it.
And so then, of course, as you step in, you realize, goodness, I do need the training. I need to learn so much about this. Is just a different level. It's the next level parenting is what it feels like. And so we did do that. And we were 36 weeks pregnant with our second child when we finally got our first respite call. And we had been licensed for a year. And we just thought, we want to use this license. And we'd go into all these trainings. We saw these families looked a lot like us. And there was diversity, of course, but we always thought like, you get to this point in your life when it's perfect and everything can be on hold. And now it's foster care time. And that there's going to be a perfect stage for that. And surely it's not this stage that we're in now as young parents. And yet we looked around and saw, there's all sorts of different stages and people are just doing it. They're just bringing kids along in the life they're already living. They're not waiting for life to stop. And so it was seeing other families in person at these other trainings and conferences that helped us feel confident that I think we're just going to do it. We're just going to say yes to a long-term placement. And so that was when our second biological child was 10 months old, that then we decided to jump in. And then the rest is history.
What did you do prior to? Because this is what you do more full-time, correct? And Andrew works in...
yeah.
But did you do anything prior to this?
Actually, for about 7 years of that, I was working as well.
Okay.
I was either working mostly like pretty part-time, like 20 hours from home probably. It was like marketing stuff for a couple different companies. And then I would always take a break when I would have a new biological child, and I would request a break. Usually I only got a shorter amount of time, though, if it was a new child had come in from
Yep.
foster care. But there was a year where we thought we were going to be done fostering, but we still had an active license, and it was kind of a perfect time for our kids where we could get them all in school and go ahead and work full time. At that time, we had 3 biological children. And so I'm like, okay, we're going to do the full time thing. And a week into that new job, I get a call I couldn't turn down. It was for a teen mom that was Spanish speaking. And I said, you know what? I just got a new job. It's just not good timing, you know? And now you look back, you're like, it wasn't good timing for me, but this child didn't get to choose that timing.
Exactly.
It's
Yep.
never convenient. And God does have the perfect timing, even though it didn't feel like it for me. So I'm apologizing to my boss, and I'm like, I don't want to be in that place. I want to be reliable. They're just getting to know me. And so we said we could do the night. And you know how that sometimes can turn into, they walk in the door and you just know we can do more than the night, and we need to. And she wanted us to do more, and we said yes. So she ended up being with us about 40 days, and that was our first teen mom experience. She was expecting and
How
just
old
very
was she?
young. She was 14, but we magically got her into developmental peds very quickly. That never happens. And they said developmentally more like she's probably more 12 and would play with Barbies, and just such a sweet kid. And so at Merritt's, that ended up getting thrown out, and she ended up getting sent back. And that really broke my heart because I didn't feel like justice was served. Months later, I found out God stepped in when the system didn't evaluate that properly, and there were some failures there, and just a really cool God story there. But then we thought we were done. And then a few months later, I get an almost identical call.
Really?
And I just kept thinking, I kept picturing that first girl sitting in the office waiting for me to say yes. And so we said yes again to the night, and that turned into 2.5 years before they found safe family to go to.
It's incredible. Yeah. So, I mean, this is, a podcast of, just trying to talk through different things and not necessarily, what's wrong with the system. It's how can we make it better, and what can we bring to this, and we have nonprofits on the show, directors, CEOs, and then, just people who are in the trenches like you and Andrew, just, doing it and fostering. And, every person I seem to talk to says something similar. It's like we're waiting for the right time to do it.
Yeah.
And everybody has always said 100%, there's just no right time. You just got to do it. You just jump in and say yes, and you'll figure it out. It'll come to you. You'll know what to do, especially if you're, relying on God to help in those situations, and
That's
and
it.
seeing stuff.
Yeah,
and
you need that.
so that was your second placement that you had, or was there some in between?
No, that
there?
was 6-7 years in. Our first placement was a little boy who, it was my first experience with sibling sets. I didn't know there was even a sibling, and the transporter dropped him off. I go out there to meet them, and this is our first foster care experience. And it's this little, he did speak some Spanish, little boy. He's cuddled up next to his sleeping 3-year-old sister, and he's 4, she's 3. And I said, "There's a sister?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm heading to the next house." He said, I was like, I didn't know there was a sister. Should we wake him up? And oh man, it just broke my heart. And he's like, better not to. I didn't know what to do. And here's suddenly
a caseworker, or
this was a
police?
transporter. So
Okay, transporter.
I've found out, usually they don't know much about the case. They're just dropping off the child. Yes.
Yep.
And so this poor 4-year-old boy wakes up in my arm. Not only is he in foster care and doesn't know where his grandma is, but now where's his sister? And that was my first, I don't know what we can do, but now I want to keep siblings together, which is a big reason we were here this year, was the on-site support, knowing some of the needs that have come into our home. We felt like we could do bigger sets with more on-site support. That was where that seed was planted. And then the next time we got a call, so they left about 40 days. And then the next set, we ended up having one that stayed for 2 years. That was a little girl that came at age 3 and left at age 5. And just another God story. I mean, I could just tell you story after story, where even we just saw God plant seeds in that family's life. And now this last fall, she's been gone for 5 years. And the dad let me call her on her birthday and just see things that she remembers and that she still keeps these memory boxes and can take me around her house and say, Miss A, look at all these different things that I remember is so cool. And that's what sustained us in our fostering journey. It's not been the system. It's not been that everything's perfect. It's not been that we're saints or that everything goes according to plan. It's God has put on our heart the importance of planting seeds of gospel hope in the lives of children from hard places and their families. And so if we frame it that way, it completely changes the discouragement you can feel. Because if you invest in a child and then they leave, it can feel like, well, we did nothing because we didn't get to keep them. Or you interact with a child for just 5 minutes, or they come, they're supposed to stay long term, and they only came for a night. We had several of those, and they found somewhere else the next day family-wise. And so you just think, God, why did you even have them come at all? Like, what was the purpose? Why? And time again, God has pressed on my heart, even in 5 minutes, you can plant a seed of gospel hope. You can have these powerful gospel conversations that lift up a child in their deepest, darkest hour that may stay with them 5, 10, 20, you don't know how many years later. And you got to trust God to water those seeds. And that's the hope and faith that propels you to keep going.
Yeah. Last Friday, I had interviewed Kim Trainer, Kim with Fostering Family. And that was something that, we were talking about was just the, how fostering, you think when you get into it, like you're going to change this kid's life. You're going to bring them in and love them and show them what a real family looks like. And you're the one who ends up being changed completely. That child changes you, and I was at a conference, and as I'm learning through this and, trying to learn as much as I can about just fostering and foster care, there's so many things that keep people from just, taking that first step.
Yeah.
And, and I hear a lot where you talked about, I just don't know if I could do this because, I don't, what happens when that child leaves, and I don't think I could handle that when they're not permanent, but I don't want to adopt. I mean, it's like you start telling yourself
It's
all these things.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, did you go through some of those struggles, starting off like, I don't know if we can do this just because I'm going to get too attached. Right. But I know you have stories of just like that one where, yes, I guess the best thing is that biological family gets everything together and is able to bring back their children and be able to love them in a way, the ones that do that. And then you're still somewhat a part of that child's journey.
That's the dream. Yeah, it is. I actually have a harder time with the in-between. I thought the beginning and the ending would be the hardest. It is all hard, but and there's big emotions and roller coasters on both ends. But I find the in-between to be tough because especially if the plan is for them to go home, you've gotten through that exciting hurdle of getting them to a point of stability. You've done all the things that you thought maybe God brought them to you for these reasons. You've planted seeds, you've got into the day-to-day, and then now what? Now you've got them established in all these things, and it's easy to lose sight of every moment is precious when you get started into that day-to-day routine of now we're stable, but now we want permanency for this child. And it's so hard when you don't hear what permanency is going to look like. And really it's a daily act of faith to get to the next day without a plan. And you're advocating for, can we please make sure there is a plan of permanency for this child? But you don't always have a very clear cut. You might have a court date where they say we're gonna probably make this decision, or we're just maybe going to review it and continue it. But until it gets in front of that judge, you don't know what call you're going to get. Are you packing that kid up to get him ready to go that day, or do you have another year or two? And that for me was the most challenging, where I had to cry out to God so much, and I had to be willing to reach out to the community and let other people in. And it didn't have to be just me that was this child's village, or my husband, or our kids. it was in the in-between where I would get really tired. And I really needed, okay, what nonprofits are there that could help with this specific need? Or what person at the church, can I put out this specific need to the church? And is there anybody? Because this thing that happens every Tuesday night is really wearing on our whole family. But this child needs it. And I don't want that daily grind to be then what leads us to say, oh, we just can't continue. It's just too hard. So who can step in to help with this specific need? That I have found to be a big help. With the goodbye, we really, really try to focus all the way along that we're launching this child. A seasoned foster parent told me that once, and I thought that was really wise. When we were first looking at saying goodbye to our foster that had been with us for 2 years, my kids actually were a lot more stable than I was. I was a mess. I was just broken, and yet hopeful that this was going to be okay for her to go back home. I was so hopeful that her family would let us stay in touch, but I didn't know that 5 years later I'd get a call on her birthday at that point. Yeah. I didn't know if she would just drop off the face of the earth, and I'd always worry about her. Is she okay? And that was really hard, that unknown of that goodbye. And oh man, just so much time on my knees. It brings you so close to God because you have to rely on him. And we're really, with our biological kids too, or adoptive, someday the goal is always launch.
Yeah.
And that foster parent said to me, your goal with these kids is always launch, but you have less time probably with these kids in foster care. So every day is so precious to invest in them, and you're preparing them for launch faster. So for that 5-year-old, launch looks like, let me teach her how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in case she's not going to have food in the house and all they've got is bread. And how can I help her have survival skills when I've not been in that family's home. I don't know what she's walking into, and I'm picturing the worst. So how can I prepare her at age 5, as heartbreaking as that was, not knowing, again, later, they were still going to be stable in 5 years, but I just didn't know. So how do I prepare her for launch and just plant seeds of hope that someday God can water, that Jesus loves you, girl, and that you're not alone, and that even when I can't be there for you, no one can take Jesus away from you. He goes with you.
Yep. It's powerful. Yeah. At this conference I was at, they were talking about, that, Jesus is not asking us to just, step in and dabble in certain stuff that's easy. A lot of the things that he calls us to do is difficult. It's hard. It's uncomfortable. And, it's one thing to believe in God, but it's a whole nother level to trust that his will and his plan is so much greater than what we think needs to happen or what we want to happen. And I think that's okay, that we have plans and desires of what we want for this child, but it's when it goes off track in our own minds, off of our plan, where how do you handle that? And it's a maturity thing. It's a growth. It's wisdom. And just saying, God, I trust you.
Oh, man.
And being able to let go. There's so many areas in my life that have nothing to do with as major as this, and I still struggle in just little areas of control.
Well, it's surrender. And that's what's so hard, because we all want to pick up our church coffee. That sounds awesome. And literally, I love a good church coffee. And you sit there and, this is so comfortable. And the Bible says, pick up the cross. Yeah. You're going to sacrifice something. I've often thought of the story of Elizabeth Elliot. And, when you think about a mission field, it's far away. When you think about risk and missions, it's a noble effort, right? It's far. And there's not always this acceptance in our hearts as Christians to welcome it into your home. And if Elizabeth Elliot's story was she experienced the loss of her husband here in the States because of a mission she was involved in, and then she re-entered that with her children to give the gospel to the people that had killed her husband. It sounds so good as this old story that's far away. But if you actually think about that in the frame of foster care and the risk and the willingness to enter in or even bring it into your own home, it's not very popular. It's this idea that missions should be out there and support your missionary, and I think that's awesome, and I agree. Also, there should be just as much excitement over the child that lives a few blocks down that entered your home and your church that's not perfect. And they may not have all the exact same characteristics as someone that is far away. They may look a lot more like us. And then if they don't fit exactly like us and they've got all these challenges, we kind of shrink away from that. And we want to keep to ourselves. And the comfortable Christianity, it's a lot more uncomfortable to enter into sacrifice and surrender. We a lot of times like to think with foster care, there can be a lot of anger, and we like to think of that story of, Jesus overturning the money tables. Lots of people, we can recall that one real good.
Yeah.
We forget that Jesus also died for them. That's actually not the end of the story, is the turning over of the tables. He then went and died for those. He said he died for the whole world.
Yeah.
So he died for them too, even when there was a point where he sensed injustice and he, as God, could step in and act that way. And that doesn't give us this ability to walk through foster care and just respond in anger to everything. If fear is our motivator, I just always think of that perfect love casts out fear. And when you're operating out of love and the gospel, you're just going to approach conversations and relationships differently. And then when you leave that, when that child leaves, or you decide you're done with foster care, I mean, my heart and desire is that those seeds were planted, not seeds of fear and anger, and my plan needs to go according to plan, but did I surrender to God? And is there love that was planted? Is the gospel planted? And that's so hard because we can't get in the way. We got to ask God to not let us get in the way.
You mentioned just a few minutes ago about, a community of, church and nonprofits, when you were just like, where do I turn to? And, we all know the statistics, 90% of families that are supported by a church that are fostering will continue to foster for more than a year, maybe even 2 or 3 years, because they feel that in those moments of just despair or grief or just I'm just tired.
It is too much.
Yeah,
when you think you're the only one that thinks it's too much, and maybe we're just not cut out for it, that's when you exit and you don't realize everyone faces that. Yeah.
And even Jesus needed
breaks.
Ministered to, his
Sabbath,
time and pause and prayer and having his disciples and other people do some stuff for him so he could just, take a break. And so as far as your experience, with the church, what are some positive things? Because, part of this is really, this podcast is, we want all churches to be involved somehow, some way, especially when you're talking about, you just mentioned about that child that lives 2 or 3 blocks from the church. Americanized churches, so to speak, is, like you said, we show up, drink our coffee, we say hello to everybody, we get fed, and thank you, God, for filling me up, and then we go home.
Yeah.
And then we come back, and it's like, what are we doing in between? What are we doing outside of these walls? And, how is the church, stepping in and doing this? I know you've got some experience.
I'll give you a tough example and then a great example. Okay. At church we were at a long time ago, we experienced a lady walked up to us who was so well-meaning, and she saw us struggling. We had taken in a sibling set of 2, trying to do siblings, and we didn't know one had special needs and there was so much. And then we had 2 of our own. They were 3, 3, 1, and 1. And we just, looking back, I'm like, that would have been hard. And this is like day 2 with them, right? And we show up at church thinking this is where we should go. And it was where we should go. But it was awful. It was terrible. They were all crying at the same time. We got them in the car, and we were like, well, Lord Jesus, please come quickly. Please help us. And while we're in the middle of that, people don't know how to enter in, and that's okay. But someone walks up to me and she goes, oh, I'm just so thankful. And she says, I'm just so thankful my children aren't like that.
Oh, wow.
There is just no hope. Look at them. They, all that they've come in, and there's no hope for them. And thank you, Lord, for this example, because it fills me with hope for my kids, because my kids have so much better of a start. And I didn't know how to respond, and I wasn't angry with her, and I'm still not. But I've thought about that many times, because what hit me was, if there's no hope, then what are we doing? If children don't have a perfect start, and they're the castaways and the throwaways of society, and the unseen children that they're kind of the bad kids sometimes, that they won't sit down in class and have all these undiagnosed issues and, what's really going on there. If we won't enter in and there's no hope, is the gospel really not strong enough for that? Is our faith willing to enter in to that instead of observing it? It's so easy to sit back and really get critical of a child or of a family even when we've never been behind those closed doors. We've never seen, we've never walked with. And once you are willing to get behind closed doors in a trustworthy way, in a kind way, you see things you can't unsee and you understand the needs so much better. And I think when churches are willing to enter in, not in a judgmental way, but in a how can I serve specifically way, not call me someday, but hey, is there a specific need I can pray for? That's a really easy way to not put yourself on the hook, because you may not be able to do much and you're worried, oh, what if I offer something and they say, yeah, I just would love $1 million, and you're just, I can't. So what do you can pray. And sometimes when you ask, how can I specifically pray this week? They'll say, pray for a new booster seat for kiddo that just came. Pray for this kiddo that just came. And you know what you have? You have the opportunity. Maybe you can't go out and buy it, but you just saw on Facebook Marketplace someone's getting rid of one.
Yeah.
Or you've got a friend, or yours is sitting in the garage. And can you be their person? That's what's always missing in churches, is somebody willing to step up and say, I'll be your person. You let me know what to pray for. I will be the person that rallies people to pray, and I will be the person to look for, is there somebody that can meet that need if I can't? And because that foster family, when they're the person scouring Facebook Marketplace and they're the person trying to find a good deal on these shoes or this bike, or guess what? They've got a kid tugging on them while they're trying to do that. They're trying to actually be present and in the moment. If you can step in and be their person, because you're not there physically with that child tugging on you, you allow them to be more present and have more of those Christ-filled moments instead of a, hang on just a minute, I'm doing something for you, but it's on here. And to be able to be more present and to know that there is the church stepping up in a tangible way. We connected with Fostering the Family as a really practical resource for, hey, how do I start this at our church? Because where we were, there was a heart for it a few years later, but it just people didn't know how to enter in. And so that gave us some training that could come in and some just like a framework to start something at our church. And it's changed over the years based on the needs. A really cool story is Jess Martin. Oh man, she is a gal that just kind of came out of nowhere at church, and her whole family stepped in. My husband and I ended up starting that foster ministry at our church, and Kim Trainer was really helpful in coming in and helping us get that started. And in that first training that we did, and Fostering Great Ideas helped us with some training there as well. They're another awesome resource. And in that first training that we did, there were quite a few couples there, and there was this newlywed couple sitting there. And, you know, me and the 5 years past them, oh, they're so young. And, oh, they're just, I'm thinking they're probably too young to enter in. It's not the right time for them. But come on in, and they were the ones that showed up each week. And they were there, and they weren't scared by the stories, and they laughed at the things that you do have to laugh at or you're going to cry. Yeah. And they just kept coming. And then they started getting involved in our foster kids' lives and other lives of kiddos. They just started stepping in, and we had a teen mom come, and I was supposed to work that day, and I was desperately trying to find childcare for her baby so that the teen mom could rest, but I could work from home and step in where needed. And Jess and her sister Jenna came over, and Jenna was the one that was in our training. Oh man, God just works all things together for good. And their parents ended up moving here. It's just such a cool story how God was using each of them in different ways and putting foster care on their hearts. And her parents were involved with an Isaiah 117 house in Waco, Texas. Okay. And I had just gotten involved with helping bring Isaiah 117 house to Greenville, and being a part of that exploratory team at the beginning, this is a couple years ago, and going to see out the houses in Tennessee. So we connect with this family, and it's like all these worlds and roads collide, and you just see God at work. And Jess she was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. I just went to her funeral a few weeks ago. And to see God's impact through her life when she got caught on fire with mission. And a big part of that was God put just a calling on her heart for kids in foster care. Jenna and her husband finished that training at church, got licensed, recently adopted 4 kids out of foster care. And Jenna got to see that before she passed and
Amazing.
just poured into those kids. This last summer, she knows this is her last summer to live. What does she want to do? She comes to me and says, Andrea, I would love, if you would let me, make a foster freezer meal for each foster adoptive family at the church for every week of the summer. And so there were at least, I think it was 4 or 5 families at the time that were actively needing support.
Yep.
And she brought a freezer meal for each of them for every week of this of that summer. That's how she wanted to spend her final days. And I'm going to read to you her text that this last December, so this is just a couple months ago, she texted me and she said, I think I finally need to be off of the team. Because I tried to get her off of it earlier, and she wasn't ready. She texts me. She says, that she thinks she has to say this is her last week. I mean, she's on hospice at that point,
Okay.
right, heading into hospice. She says, I had a good cry on the way to drop off the last meal on Monday. I didn't quite realize the sense of loss I would experience giving up such a dearly beloved ministry. You have no idea the joy and purpose, both of which the Lord knew I would need, all in his perfect timing, these past months. Truly thank you for the blessing of being involved. And what I saw in her life was it was never just food or a meal. It was a prayer. It was loving these families. It was, how else can I help? It was abundant life. And I told her that in my text. And she said, the only life worth living.
Wow.
And I have screenshot that. I'll probably save that text forever. And I shared that at her funeral. And that was her life. Was near the end, her mom said those last 2 years, she saw her walk with the Lord get the closest it's ever been. And I'll never stop thinking about Jess when I think about the church entering in and a life worth living and how to practically start being a part of a mission field that's just right around us.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't really know where to go from there. That's
She's
that's
just
an incredible
awesome.
story. I've never heard that, from you before, but that's God bless people just like her, because we know that her story is probably many others that have gone through something similar that we just don't know.
They're
Like you
unseen.
said, unseen, and they don't want to be seen.
Yeah. Oh, Jess wouldn't want me to say anything.
I know.
Yeah.
Because there's have such a servant heart to. It's not about me. Mm-hmm. And that is one thing that I do believe I have found in foster care, is taking the focus. It's not about me at all. Like it's truly finding a way that I felt, leaving a career,
right,
and still, doing some of the mortgage stuff, but finding a different purpose of, I got so sucked into growing a business. How big can it get? How much money can we make?
Yeah.
And it's
starts to feel empty
addictive.
after a while.
Yeah. But it's never enough.
Yeah.
And you're constantly like, I got to keep producing. I got to keep doing this.
Yeah.
And you said I just kind of felt empty, and I didn't know why.
Yeah.
And I found myself just further and further away from God because I started focusing on myself so much.
Wow.
And then when I was, considering like, what can I do? I need to get back. And, Brad just happened to be, like, hey man, would your wife be interested in this position that we might have coming open at Southeastern? I'm like, probably not. She's pretty happy doing what she's doing at the church as their children's minister at Central. I was like, but you know what? I actually might be interested in that. Tell me a little bit more. And he did. And I was just like, I couldn't get it out of my head. He told me to read a book, which I got a bunch of copies sitting right over there, and reframing foster care by Jason Johnson. And I read that, and it wrecked me. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I think it's a short read, pretty easy read, small group written. So, but I think after about like chapter 4, there's might be like 14, 15 chapters, I think. Like every time I read it, I just brought me to tears. And it wasn't because of the stories that were being told. It was a reflection of, I'm not doing enough.
Wow.
I'm not doing enough for the Lord. I'm so focused on myself. And like, I just couldn't, had to do something, and I was like, I don't know if fostering's in my, for Amber and I don't know. but I am going to jump in and do
Yeah,
this.
what can we do?
What can
Right,
we do?
right.
And for anybody sitting at home, watching this, it's, Andrea has the calling, and just like her husband, Andrew, of, we wanted to jump in and we wanted to be on the front lines. And, I think if you're being called to do that, you do it. I think you and I both know there's probably some parents that don't need to foster, but they can still be involved and do things to help, just like the church. Being in a small group at church that brings a meal, or something like that. What do you think about the statement of kind of, going to the church again of, I've heard Christians say this, well, foster care, that's the government's responsibility.
It actually started with the church. Church gave it over to the government.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah. And
That's
it's
the
like,
biggest problem.
And so like, I understand that there's some things that the government definitely needs to be involved with and support and help. But man, like, I just feel that, that churches are missing the boat on this. There's some churches that do great ministries with foster care, and it is a part of who that church is. And then there's a lot of churches that I don't think they know how to get involved. And maybe it's, we'll send a check once a year or something, which is great. Like, I'm not downplaying that.
Right.
But when you and I sit here and talk about, like, picking up that cross instead of just picking up that, church coffee, it requires work, effort, and probably some heartache and some uncomfortableness. But that's what we're supposed to do. So I just kind of want your thoughts on that.
I think you have to ask yourself, are you okay with people coming in that you might not be comfortable with, that might not look and act exactly like you? Because that would be the reality if you started a ministry that welcomed people into your kind of circle. And are you okay with that? If you're not comfortable with, and you do have to think about your comfort levels as far as safety goes.
Correct.
Of course. And I think the more you're willing to lean into that uncomfortableness and then just really think that through. Well, if this feels like a safety thing, then what protective boundaries can we put in place so that we can then still serve that individual? What extra training? So just thinking from a practical standpoint, trauma-based training for maybe your nursery workers. If you're seeing a lot of kids coming in from hard places, maybe you're not comfortable with the foster care piece and the government piece and all that might involve. Maybe you're more comfortable with providing preventative services to families that are at risk. Maybe there's an addiction group. Maybe there is support for single moms is a big thing.
Okay.
And yes, of course, there can be resources out on such and such road, 30 minutes, 20 minutes away. But when you think about local and how your church, there's also a church down there, right? But you don't say there's a church down there, so we're not going to be a church right here. There's always a need that's in proximity to you that nonprofit way down there will never reach them because of the proximity. I think about a single mom where we actually fostered her 3 kids this last year. And that's been a really cool story. And I just love her. I might even love her more than the kids because I just have gotten to know her and realize like these are her kids. I love these kids. Also, I just love her. And I'm so excited for her to have support now and to be able to be there for these kids in a way that she couldn't before. Yeah. And to know that they need her specifically. And so,
I think I know what you're talking about, because I do believe I will see one of those kids at camp.
Yeah, and you'll see him this summer because she's letting me take him to camp. Exactly. And he'll probably be a little stinker, but we love him. All right. And he's going to come, and he's going to get seeds of gospel hope planted. Absolutely. He doesn't have to be in foster care to need people pouring into him. Or to, like, we don't need a piece of paper to know that if somebody says we can help, there's a way we can help. Southeastern also helped me put together like a little birthday party for the middle child. I'm trying not to say names.
Yeah, I understand.
But she'd already been out of foster care for 3-4 months. And when I talked to the mom, she was like, oh, all she really wants for her birthday is to see you guys. Oh. And the more we thought about it, I was like, we could do something. And it meant so much to her. And Southeastern was so kind. We were juggling other kiddos at that point. And so how do we be there for past kiddos, but we're juggling new needs? And that was so kind of Southeastern. I could just drop stuff off and they set everything up for me, and then welcomed them in. I think there can be a fear too of kids who have now been returned in foster care to their homes and not viewing the family with love, viewing them with judgment. Well, what did you do wrong? Well, just don't do that again.
Yeah.
And then if we welcome them into our church, do we need to keep an eagle eye? And, you do need to be careful. But I think a lot of like the Samaritan, and he didn't fit, and he wasn't from that area.
Yeah, and all the people that Jesus ministered to.
Oh, if you look at that.
They were the
right.
the pagans, or the the ones that were sick, or the
poor,
lame, the cast aside. And he's sitting here going, all you religious people, the Sanhedrin, and like, what are you doing?
It's so convicting.
Yeah, it's like, you've got it wrong. This is what you should be doing. You're so worried about how much you know and your wisdom and making sure that everything is perfect, when I'm just asking you to go love these people and show compassion and find a way to help and serve.
Yeah.
And
I think we forget too that when you're willing to enter into foster care, not because you have no fear, but because perfect love casts out fear, and you just claim that, and you claim faith over fear, right? That's my biggest battle, was fear. Entering in, I'm like, I've never seen this before in church, so this must be an unwise decision. And then I had to balance that with, but if God loves these kids and he's putting this on our hearts, what safety boundaries can I put in place but still enter in? But I think we forget that foster care, when we serve a child in foster care, we're not just serving one child. You're also, I'm just realizing I got a Band-Aid on this finger. I'll use this finger now. But you're serving their caseworker, their guardian ad litem who advocates for them, or their CASA in some states. You're serving their teacher, their bus driver, their family, their extended family. When you plant a seed of gospel hope in one child, and you're documenting like you're supposed to, and you're just sharing, and we did this, and we did this, and they had this behavior, but we showed love in this way. And know that not that you're perfect, but that you're continuing and doing your best, and just trying and trying again in that daily in between. You're giving a testimony to people you would have never reached. We were able to throw a thank you breakfast for our teen mom, foster mom, and her child when they were getting ready to leave. She was turning 18 and was welcome to stay, but safe family had been found. We were able to help transition, and they were going to come get her in about a month. And so I just thought it'd be so nice. And she liked the idea too of like, let's welcome in all the people that have been in her life in the last 2 years, pouring into her, and welcome them into this little tea thank you breakfast, and pray over her future. And it was so cool to see people from all these different walks of life. They were not all believers. And those that were believers were willing to come up to by the couch in the living room, and we just put our hands over her and prayed for her and her son. And I don't know what God will do with that. I could get real discouraged if I think like, I don't know everything that's going on. How is she doing? And I try to find out. But I have to put her in God's hands. And remember that we prayed over her and we loved her. And I look around that room, and there's countless people that are impacted by that testimony, and God planted seeds in their lives too. And I'll never know how God will use that and that child you have may not even be old enough to accept Jesus. Thankfully, she did accept Jesus, and she actually has to get baptized before she left. And so there's a really cool story there. And then her son's so little, he's 2. And I pray that the planted seeds in her life will then pass down through generations. And God can use that. And your circle is not that one kid. You've got to understand the far reach, not just to that circle immediately around them, but to multiple generations afterwards. These kids do have hope. They're not a lost cause. No. They are names and faces when you're actually willing to enter in. It becomes not the ambiguous foster care word, but it becomes all these stories that flood my mind right now, and faces and names and ages and families. Just if you will enter in a practical way, you can't unsee it.
Yeah, I'm a recipient of
Well, we're a recipient of you too, because
so you talk about that of one child that I ended up you allowing me to mentor and
so
be a part
for
of,
it.
and that summer, just when we were at camp, and I really got to know him. I've seen him here on campus, and talked with him a couple of times, but didn't know much about his story. But like every morning, because I let him use my fishing pole
Right.
at the camp to go fishing. And he was like, "Can I use your fish pole? Can I use your fish pole?" And I was like, "Sure, be
Yeah.
careful with it." And so they take it down there and we start fishing, and we're catching fish all week. I mean, big
Aw.
bass. I think he caught like a 4.5 pounder. And I mean, just so excited.
He
But
was so excited.
every morning when I before I could even get to the cafeteria, he was like standing outside my
Yeah.
cabin. "Hey, can we go fishing today?" And I was like, you can. I was like, the poles are down there. Whenever you get a free time, you just
Yeah.
grab it and go. And we spent, all week just having fun together. And he just ended up just following me all around because I was paying attention to him.
Yeah.
You know?
Meant a lot to him.
And I'll never forget that. I don't know if I've told you this or not, but it was Friday of camp, so Saturday is the last day, and we're worshiping that Friday night, singing songs, and he's standing on the pew, standing up, so we're about head level, and we're singing a song, and it was just, I can't remember the song, but it was just like, it was just moving the whole week, right? And he put his arm around my shoulders and he whispered in my ear, "Thank you for being my friend." And it just wrecked me. And I was like, what am I doing? and I was like, okay, this is what God's asking me to do. And I didn't think that was going to happen that week, and all that. But that just drove me to just like, this child needs, it's not just Andrea and Andrew that have him. And then, we come back and, to wipe the tears away, I'm like, I'm going to take your kids and the foster kids, and
Oh,
we're going to go,
amazing.
we're going to go to the roller rink. And, and I'm driving the van over there, and I'm like,
I don't know how you did that.
it was just me, but all the kids were like super supportive, and, nobody hit each other, I think,
Thank you,
at the
Lord.
end. But, I was like, I got 7 kids, in a car. I've never done this before, but I'm like, I'm going to be the funkle, the fun uncle, and we're going to have a good time. And watching our church, just because it was a church night, like a family church night, we're skating rink over at Roebuck, and and I took them all. And was it stressful? Absolutely, because where's this kid? Where's this kid? Where's such and such? And I'm
Story
like,
of my life.
Miss A is gonna kill me if I lose a child or something happens, And I'm never gonna forget that though. Like, I'm never gonna forget the ride over there and the ride back, the stories. Your biological son Jackson,
Man.
he was so funny
He's
the whole
a
time.
hoot.
He
Yeah.
is, and just and spending time with them and just letting them be a kid. I mean, there was no rules, regulations at that point besides, what the roller rink says you can and cannot do. But it was just, I just get to be a kid.
Yeah.
Without thinking about all this other stuff that's
Heavy
going
stuff.
on in my life.
Yeah.
And so I'm thankful for the seeds that you've planted. And, that child probably would maybe have said those things if it wasn't for the year or so that you had already poured into him.
Wow.
And, and it's so many. I mean, there's so many stories like that.
There are so many.
But
And I didn't know. I did not know that.
Yeah, I'd never told you
Oh,
that.
no, thank you. Oh, that's a gift to know that. You probably don't know this, but that was the first battle we picked with him, was you're going to go to camp.
Really?
Yes,
He didn't
because
want to go?
he didn't want to go. And there were so many other things that pointed to, this is going to be so good for you. And so, Mr. John, you were camp for him. And that's why when he came home, he had a big smile on his face and a giant picture of a fish and loved it. And now I know why.
Yeah.
That God had that for him, and God put on our heart, like, I think he really needs to go. And he had you there. And I'm just so thankful, because that was the first turning point where he started to trust us and realize, okay, if they say this is really important, I think we need to try to do this. There could be something good in it for me, and there's an adult I can listen to and trust that has my best interests at heart. And there's good in listening and trusting someone other than myself.
Yeah. It was a great experience. And like I said, that I don't think I've changed that kid's life. I know he's changed my life. And so,
No, I think I want to say something about that because I think it feels like in these shorter interactions that it can feel like this minimal thing. But you did more than camp and the roller skating rink. Then you started taking him to his old church where he could have those relationships. But more than that, he could have time with you and a mentorship experience. And the hard bit is the in-between there, right? Because it's one thing to run into a child in a camp where you already were going to be and pour in. It's another thing to intentionally seek out and live in the in-between that foster family is in. Mm-hmm. They're in the in-between, and you are that support for him. Where Wednesday night, that was something super important for him that he would talk about. I mean, you know that because I'd have to text you and be like, alrighty, what's the plan for this week? Because he's going to ask me. But you stepped in the in-between, and that's not nothing.
Oh, I appreciate that. My only goal, honestly, just being completely candid, was how can I help Andrea and Andrew?
Well, we really appreciate it.
And then, then here comes this kid.
It's
totally unexpected, and it was just like, at first I was like, man, this kid is not going to leave me alone all week. And by the end of the week, I'm bawling. That Friday night, because right after he said that, I had to turn. I was like, he can't see me cry. I was like, get it together, John, get it together. And I didn't know what to do. It was a moment of just, how do I respond to something like that? There's so much weight in where that was coming from.
Yeah.
And, and it was just like, oh, man.
Well, that speaks to, just if you've ever considered people out there who are like, how do I start jumping in? Mm-hmm. Being a respite family, it is a different experience than fostering. I find being a respite family a lot more fun, actually, because you get to kind of be that funkle a little bit, or what would it be, fancy? I guess that does not sound right. That does not sound right. Don't use that. But you get to step in a little bit more of a lighthearted way, understanding that child, in that weekend that you might have them, you're not going to deal with the caseworkers necessarily. You're not going to be dealing with court and necessarily the heaviness. You do get to step in a little more of a lighthearted way and give them a little break from a lot of the heaviness they're experiencing. It also gives the foster family a break from the heaviness that they're walking alongside. There's a big piece of the grief these kids can hold that you end up carrying with them. So a respite family is a very practical way to help and step in and experience that without quite the same level of heaviness.
Yeah. We try to promote that with churches, and when we're talking to people about trying to get involved, is hey, you don't have to be a full-time foster parent. I mean that might lead to that. Mm-hmm. You got in at respite, and then you are living on campus.
Right.
And having a house full of foster kids and dealing with that, and we're thankful for your time here at Southeastern. And I know that you and Andrew are going to continue to foster, but y'all are just moving back towards Simpsonville in June, I think, or end of May, June, somewhere right there. And, what would you say were, some challenges, maybe just, in the system or fostering and you've talked about Southeastern and, how did Southeastern kind of step in and help with some of those challenges that you were having?
I mean, I see you looking at your watch, and you just gave me the loadest question.
No. I just want to make sure I wasn't going for 2 hours.
No, you're right.
I know time goes by.
Well, I've got a
fast.
book about that question.
Okay.
No, I've written many lists over the years because when you get into it, you really do think, you were mentioning you think you're going to change that child, the child changes you. Also, you get in thinking, I'm going to change the system. And I'm not downplaying that. I think there's still that need. However, I look at it so much more differently now. And even when I saw that question, I feel so helped by Southeastern here on campus. I feel very spoiled that I had a hard time recalling my list.
Oh, wow.
Because so much is met for our current kids. Really, Southeastern is now the person. Whereas before, I was always like, where do I go with, there's all these needs. Now it's a quick text, and I know somebody's working behind the scenes, and I can focus on the kiddo. And it's such a big help.
I think that's probably one of the things that we talk about here a lot is if we can support the parents and provide them with resources and opportunities to just kind of take a step back every once in a while, that they'll be better foster parents.
Yes.
They'll be in a better mind frame to be more patient, to love that child a little bit more, because they're feeling the love from some outside support.
That's
And it's, Southeastern, I know we do great work in, there's a lot of foster care placement agencies here in the upstate that do phenomenal work too.
Oh, yeah.
We're not in competition. But it's one of those things that because of Southeastern, we wouldn't be what we are if it wasn't for the churches pouring into us and funding and donating and doing stuff so we could give those things to the foster parents who are fostering with us.
Yeah.
And that's the cool thing when you start seeing, like, if it wasn't for the churches supporting us, then we couldn't support the foster families, and then the families can't really support the children. Yep. So.
Well, you see maybe a giving receipt if you've given to a cause. What you don't always see is the behind the scenes of how that plays out. So somebody gave so that single mom I mentioned received a bike and a trailer to help get her kids to school because she didn't have a car.
That. Yeah, I remember that.
And helped contribute
and very
towards
thankful
that.
for it.
Yes.
Just like,
yeah. And I'm telling you, furniture to make sure that she had what DSS required for her to accept her kids back home. All the clothes that could be needed, diapers, wipes, just the practical piece, and not the stinginess of, well, are your kids still going to be in care? That if they're not still in care, you need to be able to figure all this out on your own. Yeah, eventually she's going to get there, but what can we do to help? And that's always the attitude here, and I just love that. It takes so much of that burden off of me, and I get to have the fun job of like, hey, here's the need. I'm up close and personal, so I get to see it. Here's the need. Can you find anybody? And I know that if there's somebody that can help with that, someone's out there with Southeastern looking for that specific need to get met. That just takes so much time off. And that plus just some of the practical on-site support is why we've been able to help so many more kids this year. I think we've had 16 through this year. Not because we just want to be a revolving door, but
that's how it's happened.
It is like the cases. Some of them went home a lot sooner than we thought. We had a case we said yes to long term, and within an hour, I get a call that they found a family member and they're leaving the next day.
Oh, wow.
And yet, between PS I Love You, which is a great foster closet, and Southeastern, those two girls left with lice treatments. They left with full wardrobes, washed and folded. All the medicine, strep throat medicine. I mean, everything they could need to set them up for success, and a pecan pie because they love that. It was it was heading into Thanksgiving, but they were so excited to be with their family. And just these mountains here on campus are a testament to God's handiwork, because one of them was the caseworker drops her off and she goes, by the way, she's probably going to be having panic attacks all night because she's never been anywhere else. And they were, I think, in their car, and sleeping somewhere else was really scary to her, understandably. And we're strangers. And so she and her sister are sharing a room, and it's nighttime. And I said, do you like mountains? I said, in the morning, you'll see mountains right outside your room. You got the best view in the house. And she was just really just not herself. And her sister's like, yeah, she likes the mountains. She's just scared. And this is the younger sister. Oh my, they were just the sweetest pair. And just over it. And I said, can I pray for you? I always offer that every night. And I've only had one kid turn me down out of, I don't even know how many kids. And I was like, okay, I'll pray in the other room for you. But
I'm praying for you.
I'm
You might
still
not know
praying
it, but I will.
for you, but it's okay. I don't have to pray right here. But this girl, she, yes, you can pray for me. And she said, I was praying and praying to God to come help us, and he never did. And so I don't know if he's real. And these questions, these things these kids say that are just theologically deep, and you're just, what do I even say to that? And you just sit in it with them. And you know what, honey? He's here for you, and he loves you. And the next day, she's in a little better spirits, and we've got her medical care, we've got full wardrobes, and just thank you so much to all the resources, and even another Southeastern family going to pick up those clothes for us, because we literally were just heavy with needs. And she says, we're coming home. And that morning she had said, I don't see the mountains. They were covered. Sometimes they're covered in the morning with the clouds, and you couldn't see them. Stuff, And she kind of like, you telling the truth here? Are there really mountains? And that afternoon we come home and she had all these great spiritual questions and deep, she says, maybe there is a God. And we get home and you can see the mountains just bright blue, just beautiful out there. And I always look at those mountains and think, oh, from where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. And that's my respite a lot of times, just looking at those mountains.
Wow.
And I said to her, and God just gave me the words, you know what? Sometimes those mountains are covered, but they're always there.
Wow.
And sometimes you can't see God working, but he's always there. And it sunk. We had 2 days with her and her little sister. It sunk. I don't know what God will do with that, but he did something. And it's got story after story like that, where kids come in, you rush to their needs. You don't know how long you'll have, but it's this, yeah, we're going to launch them someday, but we're going to launch them in the glory of God for his name and do everything we can with the time he's gifted us with. And it's a privilege to enter in, as hard as it is.
Yeah. Wow. You know, we've gone about an hour, a little over an hour, and I could keep talking.
I know, me too.
Oh my gosh, we could just keep talking. But final thoughts, you know, I always, you know, want to leave, you know, with, you know, if there's anything that you feel like you haven't had a chance to say. Or
Looking at my notes, which I didn't even look at. I mean, there's so many challenges.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to end on that, but there are so many ways people could enter in. But I think, like, I see teen mom and immigrant child training to be big ones. I'm actually going to enter into that, though I've reached out, and I think I'll be able to help put together some training resources. DSS in general, I think the challenge is just disorganization, and I've always thought it'd be so cool if there was a central app that put everything together, and there's these resources. There is an app that I think Clemson put together, but it's really not utilized. And that's always a need if somebody has that ability.
Yeah.
Just
well, you know, Stronger Together is one of our sponsors of this podcast, and that literally Stronger Together is a group of churches and nonprofits in the local area that we've all we get together once a month, and we talk about how can we change our community for the better. And you know, there's, I think, First Baptist Spartanburg is, you know, a part of this. Adoption Helpers.
Adoption Helpers, I'll amazing.
Have, you know, them on the show at some point.
Yes.
P.S. I Love You.
Yes.
Fact at Anderson Mill. I know I'm missing, you know, maybe one or two other kind of groups that are involved in that, but it's been really neat to, you know, be involved in so many people just wanting to serve.
Yeah.
In any form or fashion, and it's really cool to see all the different churches that are coming together.
I love that.
Because of foster care.
Yeah.
You know, it's just serving these kids. And it's like, what can I do? What can our church do to help your church? And they're not the same denominations. And I think a lot of times we get so tied into, well, I go to this church, you go to that church, and, you know, we'll take care of our own, you take care of yours. And I'm like, no, the church is supposed to be...
church, capital C.
Yeah. It's like there's supposed to be one church, not... You know, and we need to act like that, you know. So my hope and vision for the future that I think about is, as I'm involved in this group, is that the community will just get it, and the churches will get it. And there's these nonprofits out there because sometimes the church never really stepped up to do something, which is fine, but we still can all work together.
But even a lot of those are faith-based, and they're looking to meet a specific need. That's what I've noticed in this area that is awesome, is I think what I've realized stepping into the system is I no longer want to change the system. I think there's specific needs met by the church and nonprofits. And that's even, I think, a big need is legal representation for foster parents and counseling for foster parents and their families. That could be a whole nonprofit right there, is making sure that if an adoption is not going through and this child is lingering in the system 3-4 years and things are disorganized, that there could be, that foster family is not, I know families right now going through this, that it should be free, but because they've had to step in with their own attorney to move things forward, we're talking, they'll be paying on that for years. That shouldn't be the case to get permanency for children. And so if there was a nonprofit for legal representation for foster families that are just doing good work and fighting injustice, oh man, that would move stuff forward so much faster for permanency.
Well, maybe somebody out here will hear this and say, you know, I'm an attorney, this is what I do, and
Yeah.
you know what, I think I might be able to help in that area,
Yeah.
and reach out to us. You never know.
Yeah.
So,
APLA Skills Center. APLA is just a big giant document they give you that you have to figure out. It's a lot of legal words. Could there not be a place with all this skills independent training for these kids instead of a big document? Teen Mom Tiny Home Community, or just that next step after aging out, but you've got a kid and you're not ready. I will say Front Porch through Grace is awesome.
Yeah. Grace
There's a big demand, so it's quite the wait list.
Yeah.
And then special needs is another big one. A lot of kids come in undiagnosed, and you live in the in-between as a foster family, and without a name, you can't get the extra resources. But the wait list for developmental peds and therapy is very long. And so while you're living in the in-between, many foster families can't continue for safety reasons, or because of just not being equipped.
Yeah, be equipped to handle the situation.
And these kids don't always come in labeled therapeutic. And so there's that in between of, could there be somebody that can help these kids get to a developmental peds appointment faster, to get a diagnosis a little quicker, and therapy access and the extra support and resources needed faster, since these kids don't have the luxury of time. So all sorts of things like that that are specific, that aren't just angry, but are, hey, I'm not going to wait on the system to, they're seeing these kids 1 hour a month sometimes. So they're actually not always in the day-to-day, and yet they are the parent and the one that is the authority to make all the decisions. So how do we come alongside and not view them as the enemy, but do all the documentation of all the ways we're reaching out, and here's all the resources, so that they come in and they can focus on a relationship with the child instead of all this documentation.
Yeah, because I know with Southeastern, we're in the process of getting ready to remodel the whole basement down here to turn into a full-fledged counseling center for foster kids, for foster parents, for biological parents.
That's awesome.
Just for people, that just need somebody to talk to. So it's
good.
not just related to foster care, but there's a need. Wow. There's a need for people's mental health and how do I handle this? I just saw something that I've never witnessed before.
Yeah.
And I've heard something that I've never thought that I would hear.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with this. Like it's just stuck there. And being able to talk to experienced people, just like yourself. I mean, you're not a counselor, but just I'm sure there's a foster parent out here that hears your story and just like, I can do this. I can continue on, just because I know somebody else did, and they said something that just changed my mindset and helped me understand, and that I didn't know that resource existed. I need to go get in touch with them.
And just living in the grief sometimes, just being someone that's willing to sit in it with you, and turn to the Lord, and just the power of lament. And when you can do that for yourself as a foster parent, guess what? You turn around and you teach that to these kids going through grief, of let's go ahead and cry out to the Lord, and it's okay to cry. And there's all these other healthy things we can do. Also, let's cry out to him, and he can be our anchor in the storm. Recently walking that road of just deep, deep grief with a kiddo, and P.S. I Love You sent me a book on grief, and I'm starting to read that. And as I'm starting to read that, I read this person has lost somebody dear to them. Well, the child I have just lost the exact same name of a person that was dear to them. And she was going through grief that week. I was also going through grief of an anniversary of a death of a family member that week. And because God administered to my heart through that, for my grief, I was ready for a crisis grief that she faced the next day. God knew that.
It's incredible. Last question here. What's one of your hope and vision, for foster care here in South Carolina? Like, if you could say, man, if there was a couple of things that, that I would love to see and hope for, what would those things be? I know it's a very broad question.
It's a very broad question. I think it just goes back to the church taking back foster care. And I don't mean you storm through the casting over the tables and everybody's angry. I mean, you're willing for your pews to be dotted with people who look different from you, and your child care ministries to be filled with people that maybe make you uncomfortable if you met them on the street, and that your church is so mission filled that you support the mission field, and you also are living in a mission field.
It's great way to end. Thank you so much for your time today. I
You're
know
welcome.
it took a a couple of weeks for us to plan this, and
Yeah.
and find babysitters and
Well,
stuff.
thank you, Caitlin, in the office who's watching my 1-year-old right now. We would have gotten no words in if she'd been here. So.
Well, if you are watching, I'll put Andrea's information up, her email address if you want me to. If
Email
not,
address.
the email address. Fine. If you have questions or want to reach out to her, I know that
This
there'll
is
be
true.
some people that say, hey, I could maybe talk to somebody, and just provide, some not counseling, so to speak, but just an ear to listen to, like you talked about. But thank you again for being on, sharing your story. God is definitely working in your life, and I know that you realize that, and your humbleness and Andrew's humbleness, and just the time that I've been able to spend with you guys here, over the last year or so. It's just been wonderful. It's changed me, and it's made me a better person. And I'm just thankful to know people like you, because it's encouraging to sit here and just be like, every time I talk with somebody, Andrea, I just feel like I'm not doing enough, and it's like, because I hear other people and just like, man, they're just taking way more steps. Like they're stepping out into the ocean, so to speak, and just going wherever God's leading them, and letting the tide kind of just take them. And I'm like, that scares me, So if anybody else feels that way, just look at this individual right here, and I think you'll get it. So thank you again.
Much to be thankful for, and thank you guys for what you're doing.
Appreciate
it means a
it.
lot.